welcome to the 2020 series sponsored by the New York Film Academy. The 2020 series are creative conversations with visionaries from all sorts of art backgrounds, filmmaking, photography, set design, casting. We really get into the weeds and talk about, all things creative, collaborative, production, and it's really exciting and really fun. I am Liz Hinline, creative director and filmmaker. I am so thrilled today to have brilliant, fine artists, Nicola Good and Glenn Wilson. Hi, guys.
What's up?
Thank you guys for showing up. This is so great. And the other thing, audience, we're going to do 20 minutes of shop talk and then 20 minutes of answering questions from you. So please write into the Q&A and we will try to get to them. And here we go. What I'm curious about, which I think is fascinating, is that both of you guys went to Yale for photography. And what did you get out of that as an artist?
Shall I go first? I feel that it was a really rigorous program that, and when I was there, it was all analog. I learned on film and a lot of time in the darkroom, a lot of printing, shooting black and white. And it was so much about looking within the confines of the frame, but also shooting without, shooting full frame. I had to oftentimes, I was told to print with the key line so that it was obvious that I wasn't cropping anything. But it was really about thinking about the frame, thinking about what was happening, being in the moment, and also not, I think, it was a street photography sort of focus program, looking at sort of a lot of the great work of, Robert Frank, Diane Arbus, Gary Winogrand. I mean, so that was the work that I think that really inspired me also.
And Glenn, aside from what you got out of it, why did you end up going, say if it's a street photography based program, why go to school?
Well, I want to clarify, I was, give a shout out to American Studies. I was actually American Studies with an emphasis in history of art and specifically looking at the history of photography. But then on top of that, I did the full studio photography program there, which was just something that it was flexibility that program allowed me to have, which was great. But one thing for me, I would say everything that Nicola said as far as composing inside the frame, several years shaved off my life, smelling up fumes in the Yale photo lab. It also, for me personally, I got outside of the bubble, I guess, of the university, because New Haven is a complex locale. And so for me, I would run out to track practice out at the bowl 20 minutes away from school, but then I'd also go out with my camera and be basically a black man walking around New Haven with a camera, not a Yale student. So that was kind of interesting. I think it's just an analog approach, trial and error, experimentation.
And I shared too that I think that I felt like in terms of being in New Haven, the work that I did as a student also kind of took me off campus, took me out of that sort of comfort zone of being a student. And I really focused on sort of youth culture in New Haven. And I photographed a lot of young people who were college age but weren't college students. And so it was a really kind of vibrant music scene, kind of a punk rock scene, and just a lot of sort of youth culture. And so that's what I really chose to focus on and to photograph.
I saw Fishbone at the Belly Up, or not the Belly Up, at, what was that place called?
Toad's Place?
Toad's Place, yeah, of course. I got knocked in the head by Angelo at a Fishbone show there.
That's great. That's great. I've shot them actually as well. And they really know how to produce for the camera.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt.
They know how what their look is. So how did you guys gravitate towards set photography coming from, like, because you could have gone many directions, right? You could have gone editorial, you could have gone news, news. how do you go towards set photography? Nicola?
Um, for me, I mean, I grew up in LA, and my dad was a producer and director. So I kind of grew up in a sense with my dad working on a range of projects that were sort of big and small, everything from, he had a small film and video production company. It was everything from documentaries to music videos. I had an aunt who was a costume designer on sort of a lot of the early Norman Lear shows, Jeffersons and Good Times and all that. So there was sort of industry kind of creeping in, I think, to my world. But it felt like a natural, sort of in terms of photography, it feels like the same muscle in a way. Being on set is, in a sense, doing street photography, or I always kind of looked to it that way. And I felt that also kind of having cinema in my DNA to a certain degree was a sense of, I feel like I could shoot film stills as a street photographer and be a street photographer on set. And it's a great kind of independence, a great way of being a photographer without, but maintaining sort of my own sort of vision, my own way of looking at the world. And I actually started, I've been doing a lot of things to support photography. I lived in New York after I graduated and started working. I assisted a lot of photographers. I was working, doing a lot of jobs to support my own photo projects. I moved back to LA and ended up working on set, doing wardrobe, doing art department, doing a lot of different things. But I was working on set, doing wardrobe for In Living Color. And I'd always bring my camera, and that, like, wardrobe is like the kitchen of the set. So I always do kind of behind the scenes and documenting a lot of those actors and those comedians. And it was an amazing place. And that ended up, I kind of morphed into being the set photographer from that gig.
That's great. So it's not like you had like someone you looked towards or a mentor that was doing that. You just sort of naturally gravitated.
Yeah, I kind of naturally gravitated, and I had worked with my dad on small projects. He had taken me along on documentaries that he shot, and I would do behind the scenes photography. And so I kind of had that kind of entry into it. And I think it felt like a way of supporting my artwork, and at the same time, using the same muscle, like doing what I was doing anyway. And then also having I just love the camera. I love looking through the lens.
Totally. And Glenn, how did you gravitate towards this?
Love hearing that story, Nicola. I moved abroad after college, lived in Paris for almost a year, and then moved back to the States, to Chicago. And I was photographing the whole time, just on my own. I guess a black and white portfolio that folks would see me with a camera, folks that I work with at a legitimate job type of a thing. Oh, you're a photographer? Yeah. So I started getting hired for things. And in fact, I got hired for this by an organization in Chicago, a social services organization that dealt with some of the most extreme cases in the city of Chicago. And I basically accompanied social workers for a few months out into their interactions with Chicago and with their clients, which was just, it's part of my DNA, it's part of my heart at this point. But anyway, started building a portfolio at some point, just because from days at Yale, I had been interested in the collision of documentary and conceptual work. I was looking at Lorna Simpson, Carrie Mae Weems, these type of folks. Discovered a program at UCSD, UC San Diego, and decided I would, on a lark, not on a lark, but just I would apply to graduate school and see if I got in, which I did. So I'm out in San Diego working on my MFA, and I remember distinctly I got a call in my studio from a friend of mine from undergraduate days who was starting to have a serious career as an actor, but then had an opportunity to direct. And I remember he called me. I picked up the phone in my storefront studio. I'm sure, Nicola, you've heard this story. he said, Glenn, how much is conceptual art paying today? And so I burst out laughing, but sort of, you know, like, why are you asking? And he's like, I got a gig for you. I'd love for you. I know you've done street work, and it's the same. You'd be basically translating the same skill set. Show your portfolio to my producers, and then obviously you're gonna have to deal with the union. But that's how I got started. I got my first gig at a time when I was a starving graduate student, needed the dough. Cut to, by the end of that gig, I had my first son on the way. So then suddenly it was like, oh, hustle, hustle and grind and balance. So that was my first stills gig. And after that, a lot of magazine work, the union situation, getting worked out, and then some good momentum with the on-set work, which sort of cross-pollinated with the other work that I was doing.
And so what separates a pedestrian, let's say, set photographer from you guys, basically, which I consider elite, like, artists?
All right.
Let's just get into it.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Nicola, you can talk about that. You talk about that.
Let's see. I don't know what that difference would be, but I think, I mean, I know how I feel like I'm always looking, I'm always working. It's something that I do whether I'm on set or I'm not on set. It's something that I carry with me. I think I'm fascinated with what the camera can do. I'm fascinated with looking through the lens. And just how it's such an entry into other worlds. And then I think a way of discovering and just, I think just kind of something you can't stop. It's like your brain's always doing that. It's always kind of absorbing and looking, and kind of the eyes in the back of your head, and waiting, a lot of patience, waiting for something to happen, feeling like it's going to happen. And then it kind of does, and waiting for things to line up. And I'm just fascinated with people's faces, with gestures, with relationships between people, with what happens inside that frame, and looking at it afterwards. And also that, you know, just wanting to have the camera on me, and, you know, and not feeling, and I think also there's this great intersection with on-set photography, with street photography, that it's just kind of this, it is a constant discovery, but it's also, the place of a film set is such a surreal place. And I feel like there's always this opportunity to step back and see the big picture. And there's what's happening with the actors. And it's like, that's the fascination, that's the focus. I'm translating the vision of the filmmakers, the actors' process. But I'm just fascinated with everything else that's going on, that's kind of spiraling around that kind of intimate space. And there are all these other relationships, all these other people working. It's a great intersection of craft, I think, art and intellect, which is kind of odd in a business or in an art form. And it's just something I kind of can't stop doing, I guess. And maybe it's that interest or that sort of almost obsession with looking that makes me just kind of want to do it over and over and dive back in again and again.
And definitely being on set and on movie sets or TV sets or whatever set you're on, there's always things to look at, because there's a world being created.
Yeah, and the technology that changes, just the filmmaking process. There's so many people doing kind of amazing jobs and doing all kinds of things. And there's, you know, I feel like I'm invited into a world in the same way that to be invited into a world as a photographer, as a documentary photographer. I mean, I did a lot of work. I would travel with my dad and on other projects, documentaries, going to West Africa, going to Dominican Republic. And you're invited into a world that's completely different than your own. And a film set is also a world and a place where I feel like it's just like, I always feel so fortunate to have this, just to be able to be in it.
Yeah, exactly. You have any thoughts, Glenn?
Yeah, everything Nicola said, first of all.
Yeah.
But Nicola spoke to the idea of improvisational style, what you do with the moment that's unfolding in front of you, the dynamics of a very complex moment of creatives converging on a moment where everyone has to be quiet, everything has to stop, and the stage is given to an actor or a group of actors or a scene, and the director, and that whole sort of moment, that crescendo. I guess I would throw in, just to augment what Nicholas said, that I think because you are around so many other creatives, you have to bring it's beneficial to be able to bring a kind of encyclopedia, almost archival approach to the idea of image making. When you speak to a production designer, when you speak to a DP, a director, and you have a rich set of references to draw upon, where, you know, cinephiles know this when they converge and they both have a similar reference, a scene from a favorite film or whatever. So you do have to be thinking not just like a street photographer, as we keep mentioning, but also you have to think as a film historian, in the sense that how do images function? What kind of power do they have as an object that's going to flow throughout the industry and serve a purpose for the filmmakers and for the industry? How is your framing? How is your faithfulness to something about the DP's vision or the director's vision or the actor's performance going to help push it across the line and get people excited and interested in talking about it? I think that's important.
Yeah, and I never actually put that as much together with, you know, the how you're elevating the, you know, the themes, the idea, the story on multiple levels with that one photograph. And I think this is a great segue to look at some of your guys' amazing, beautiful photography. So let's pull up Nicola's work. And Nicola, if you just want to, like, I don't know, whatever you think about when you're looking at that image, what it has to do with, how did you come to, you know, creating it? Was there a thought behind it, or was it instinct, let's say, when you took the shot? So Zach, if we could pull that up, that'd be great.
Okay, this was actually just before, earlier this year, in February, and it was an Escalade commercial that Spike Lee was directing. But this, to me, speaks for the process of what goes on set, and all of the sort of this kind of wonderful choreographed dance between all the players, and it's just this. I always feel like this is really beautiful choreography, and it also is in sync with this space that the DP, the gaffer have created, and the director, and, you know, but there's all this, I feel like it's about all the stuff going on, but then it's, as a photographer, I'm sitting back, I'm looking not just at what their camera's seeing, but I'm looking at the big picture and looking off the set and looking at how the shot is made. So for me, this is about sort of that gesture. And I feel like I really love, almost in the history of art too, like there are these kind of grand moments where everything, you know, the sort of history paintings that everyone sprints by in European museums. But there's a certain beautiful flow of characters, of almost like an epic thing going on, but we're on a film set. We're on an Escalade commercial.
Oh, it's wonderful. It is so, it definitely elevates the whole feel of being on a set and that moment when
and just kind of waiting for things to line up. I always feel like there's this sense too of like you're waiting for the frame to sort of gel, and it is this, as a photographer, it is about just being ready for it to line up, and kind of holding your breath sometimes. Then we go to the next one, which is also, I think, on same project. And so much, I think, on set too is about what you can see and what you can't see. You know, it's the moments of what's covered, what's revealed, what's outside the frame, and all of it. So sort of once again, in that same sort of feeling of waiting for something to happen, but sort of the reveal. There are a lot of tricks with photography. You know, we're given a moment, we're given the ability to frame something, to isolate actions and gestures. I love faces. I love hands. I love what human bodies are capable of, and the expression. So we can go on to the next. And this is a sort of personal shot of, I've been to Cuba a number of times. It's a place I just love to photograph. And this is just a street photography moment. It feels like Cuba's a place in a way like a film set. There's so much going on. There's so many people in the street. And it is also that same thing of waiting for things to happen. And I love this format. This was shot on film on a Hasselblad X-Pan. And I just love that format because it is such a, in a way, a very cinematic view. And this was just walking on the street. And also for me too, it was these kind of odd moments that at the same time, it's a modern street, but I feel like there's something that's kind of embedded in, I look at classic paintings, I mean, for me, this, you know, being on the street in Havana, but also it's like, oh, it's the Last Supper. And seeing this lineup of people and gestures and sort of what happens when you wait for something to happen.
It's beautiful and timeless. So I'm curious, were you sitting there just waiting for things to happen, or were you passing by? Or
I was walking, and this is a whole, this is an area in Havana it's called the Malecon, and it's sort of the seawall, and it borders the ocean, and it's 90 miles from Florida. But you have this very dense, sort of gritty area, kind of a center. It was like a very urban stretch of Havana that's right across this street, and the whole city kind of comes out. People come out. It's like the stoop of Havana, and it's just it's an amazing walk along and I was just walking and just observing all the people in this space that's just a beautiful light, and people just gathering.
That X-Pan is such a great device. I mean, it's a beautiful camera.
Yeah, I love it. I love shooting film. I feel like shooting film has such a different way of working, obviously, than digital. It's like I love with film not spending time staring at the back of my camera, but really looking at what's happening on the other side. And also the sense, you know, shooting film, it's always about shooting down to zero, you know, from 36 to 0, or the X-Pan, it's like 20 frames. And, you know, digital is always about shooting to infinity. And there's such a different mindset when you're going backwards and you're just counting down, and being so, just the choices you make are so different.
Especially when you're the one coming out of pocket to either process,
get the film processed.
Yeah, but
and traveling and worrying about my little bag of film. And it's like, are they going to X-rayed on the way out? How am I going to beg the guy in the Havana airport to hand inspect it?
Circumvent it, yeah.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
And this was also in Havana on the streets, and I was riding in a car, and there's sometimes, you know, with photography, you can be invisible, you aren't in the photo, and there are other times that you can't help but be all over the picture. And this was so much about this moment of people kind of reacting to me. I feel like it's, you know, it becomes almost a self-portrait at the same time, which is it's a certain thing, you know, street photography you can do different things. And also just, I think from the work I did, like this sort of studying at Yale that I'd done in that program, it was so much also about not using a long lens, not hiding, but being kind of in the middle of it. And where it isn't about sort of the spy camera, but it's just about being in the middle of kind of just being in the world.
And is that something, and let's go to the next picture, on set, do you guys do you have to sort of feel that, you know, sometimes you can jump in and be close, but sometimes you got to get back, you know?
Yeah.
Is there?
Yeah.
That's a whole other, I mean, I think as a set photographer, I mean, there are definitely different situations. There are different kinds of scenes, different kinds, you know, different ways of shooting. Sometimes we're able to shoot while you know, if a scene, if it allows, if there's room for us, you know, we're the one I think, one of the few jobs on set that has nothing to do with what goes on screen. So if you're in close quarters, if you're in a very quiet moment, if it's very intimate, if it's very sensitive, or if just there isn't enough space, it's the photographer that usually gets kind of bounced. So sometimes I feel like we're begging for it to do our jobs. We're begging for, 125th of a second to do what we can do if it's while the camera's rolling. In other situations, we're shooting behind the scenes. We're kind of able to sneak around, but it's a funny dance. I'm sure, Glenn, you can speak about this too, just the sensitivity of how different actors want to work, how the feeling on a set, what you're allowed to do and how close you're allowed to get when you have to ask to shoot, when you have to not set up shots, but you have to ask to sort of, you have to find ways of getting what you need.
Yeah, it's I like it. I like Afro Ninja Samurai as an approach.
Okay, describe, please.
Yeah, well, just Ninja Samurai. Let's just go there. Ninja, like you are there, but no one knows you're there, and you're paying very close attention. Samurai, you are ready to, I guess, strike, and also ready to take a strike if you need to. But joking aside, I think it's about reading the room, and there's this thing called set etiquette that everyone on set needs to employ in order to do the dance properly. And it is kind of an interesting flip to go from the sensibility that Nicola was describing, where you are not trying, you're collaborative in the on the street, you're collaborating, and I'm not trying to be, invisible voyeur. I'm engaging with people in the street. But then when you're on set, the currency for us has to do with, oh shit, Glenn, I didn't even know you were here today. Like there is an element
of that. That's a nice day.
Meanwhile, you just took some badass shots that are going to be showing up across the board when this film comes out. You know what I mean? Folks are like, I didn't even see you. That type of a thing. So it's an interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes it's this feeling too, like you feel like you put on your invisibility cloak, and you kind of have to be this strange force of, it's like you have to fit in small spaces. You have to dodge the Steadicam that's backing up. You have to be aware of the blocking and someone holding the boom and all these different sort of, all this very complicated sort of puzzle. And
Nicole,
this is a great.
To speak to this photo.
Okay, and this is on the set of a show called The OA. And that's the director, Zal Batmanglij, in the center. And the DP was operating on the cameras, Stephen Meisler. And it was just the director speaking with the actor, one of the actors, Kingsley Ben-Adair. And it was just one of these kind of beautiful moments. And I always feel too, like, the way films are made now, so often the director is in Video Village, they're far from the set, you don't see a lot of interaction. So it's really wonderful when I think you have the interaction on set, when it doesn't happen sort of elsewhere, or when the filmmakers are really a part of the process. And this was a show that was so visually sort of seductive and beautiful, and just really like fantastical in terms of the production design. And I felt also that it was a set that I had sort of had a real like all access, and the filmmakers were very open to me being kind of everywhere and nowhere and hiding and doing whatever I needed to do, and very artistic. They had I think also a great visual sense when it came to photography. Just a really clever project. It was really beautiful.
Let's go to the next photo, please, Zach.
And this is another shot in Cuba. And in terms of this shot, and then I grew up in LA, so I feel like car culture is just such a part of sort of who I am. And cars are great props for photography. I think that anyone kind of knows they're great to photograph, how people are seen behind the wheel. They're beautiful objects. And I always love also, I've loved photographing. I've done photo essays on lowrider car culture and gone to way too many car shows, and just fascinated by cars. But also, you know, in terms of in filmmaking, cars sometimes become another character in a film in the sense, and it's just a great visual device also. I did a project that is coming out, I think, early next year called Little Things with Denzel Washington and Rami Malek and Jared Leto. And it felt like that was an entire film of people in cars, in different cars, and surveillance and watching each other and reflective surfaces. And the DP, John Schwartzman, did a really amazing job in terms of using cars as a real, like all the reflective surfaces, all of like looking through glass, seeing reflections. But it's just like, that's a, you know, it's sort of pun intended, great vehicle for visual connection and storytelling. I don't have shots from that because it's still a little too early, but the next shot is a shot from a film called Sylvie's Love that was with Tessa Thompson, and it's coming out, I think, around Christmas. And this film was shot here in LA, but it was a period piece, a love story, really just beautiful, lush, kind of intimate story. And it was just such a, it was, as a photographer, it was just like a beautiful project. The DP, Declan Quinn, shot it on film. And that was just something I hadn't been a part of a project where they were shooting it on film. And I was shooting digital with my Fuji mirrorless, but really thinking about film, and the way it was lit was just exquisite. And once again, cars become an amazing sort of, an amazing space for storytelling and visual storytelling. And we were shooting in a lot of just practical locations, which was really, really lovely. And this was on downtown Los Angeles, shooting at night with the entire street of period cars, period costumes, crowds of people, just all of the visual just stuff that photographers love, and beautifully lit, just really, really gorgeous lighting.
Well, it's stunning. It's stunning. You totally captured it. And the image before looked like it was from a film.
Yeah, and I feel like I could have, you know, I'm doing the same thing. You know, I love cars. I love what, like I said, sort of what they do, car culture, and just as a visual sort of mechanism. It's
stunning. Stunning. So let's jump to Glenn's work, and just sort of, what are we looking at like on this shot, Glenn, and what was your thought behind it? And your sound is off. There you go.
Sorry about that. This is a still from Harriet. What I guess is the first thing I'll say about this, just speaking to the process, is I was down, if you see the Steadicam down there in the lower right-hand corner, the Steadicam was moving around this circle of torch bearers. This is not from Charlotte. This is actually filmed period on location in Richmond, Virginia. I was down with the Steadicam operator, moving across the shoulders of these slave catchers, folks rounded up to go out to look for this mythical Harriet, who had various names. Anyway, but once I felt I had actually got a really nice shot from the POV of the Steadicam on the actress Jennifer Nettles, who was like the slave mistress on the Brodus plantation. I went and I talked to one of the grips and I said, hey, can we get that really tall, 12-step ladder or whatever? And he looked at me and he's like, it was like one of those moments where he was like, he knew what I wanted to do, pop the ladder up.
I know we're having a little droppy outy.
He's frozen.
He's frozen for a second, but that's, as we're waiting for Glenn, Nicole, you can speak to, that's interesting, the collaborating with the crew.
Yes, no, that's something oftentimes we have to find a spot. Like we aren't always given the liberty of being at where the camera is, where the A camera is shooting. We have to find something else sometimes. We have to ask for a ladder. We have to crouch. We have to climb. We have to find our shot and work with, you know, and we just, you know, we have to call upon favors. And certainly, you know, the grips and electrics become our best friends when we need that 12-step ladder.
Let's just, Zach, let's run through a couple of Glenn's shots and see if he jumps in. If not,
I think he's coming back. I see him.
carry it.
Let's see.
Here we go. Hey, Glenn, and your sound's off.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. So we're just jumping forward.
Sure.
To,
Sure. This is also obviously from Harriet. We're out. John Toll was the cinematographer on this film. So being a part of his crew, you know, as part of the camera department was a complete privilege. And watching him negotiate a period film, working with Casey Lemons, the incredibly soulful and brilliant director. You know, to Nicola's earlier point, I had to say, look, yo, I need to be on that boat. You know, the boat is already, there's multiple boats. You're seeing two in this frame, but there's the camera boat. And of course, the boat's doing this the whole time. So the camera's stabilized. Any additional weight on the boat is going to change the equilibrium. If one person is not thinking and they start moving around during a shot, well, then the camera arm moves around. So I had to gingerly convince that I needed to be on that boat with my camera. And John Toll, you know, gave me the nod and said, of course, you know, got your camera right, jokingly. And I got on there and there was a grip right behind me. I couldn't get the privileged angle that the camera was straight on Cynthia Erivo's gaze. She was staring almost directly into camera. But I had a grip behind me and he wasn't doing anything while the cameras were rolling. So I said, hey, can you drop that little reflector in as soon as they say cut, drop that reflector in, that bounce, and I'm gonna take a pass at a couple of shots. Mm-hmm. And this is the one I came up with that I really liked. There's a bunch of them, but.
That's gorgeous.
Amazing. And so we were just talking, Nicola, you know, you come on to set, you're not part of any of the you're your own department. And part is, it seems to me, the finesse of the craft is also making friends with all the grips, being, you know, the easy person to work with, getting them excited to work with you, getting the DP excited to work with you, the director excited to work with you. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And I think a lot of that just comes with, you know, being brought up properly, you know, just having understanding at any given point in time, the priority that's at the forefront of your mind is not the priority that's at the forefront of any of the other 120 people who are moving parts in the machine. And so when you do the dance in such a way that you step out of the way to give clearance and access to somebody who's attempting to hit a 3-point shot from their department, the second you get the ball passed to you and you're going for the 3-point shot, everyone sees you're open, they clear out and let you take the shot. So that's crucial.
I love it. Let's go to the next shot, Zach.
This is what I love about this shot, I gotta say, other than this beautiful brother, is the fact that it was about 7 in the morning, 7:30 in the morning. I was on my way to work down at LA Center Stages, working on a job that was just massive technology, green screen all day long. It was Jungle Book, which was absolutely fascinating in and of itself, just to see the full force of the technology brought to bear for that film. When I was hired for the job, the producer said, it's probably gonna be the most boring job you've ever had. And I have to say, initially I was like, but I found myself always finding something on a daily basis to keep me engaged. That usually had to do with the techniques, the merging of different technologies with the analog physicality of like human actors. Anyway, I'm on my way to that gig, and I'm taking my, LA surface streets, shortcuts to get to work every day. And I'm down sort of in the MacArthur Park area, and I pass this brother, and the light is just popping on him. He's the only person out there. It's like me and him. It's 7:30 in the morning, and he's out there lifting. And I was like, damn, beautiful. So hit the brakes, come out without my camera. And I said, excuse me, brother. And one thing I remember is this dude was the most soft-spoken dude you've ever met. His name's Marcus. And I said to him, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but this is a beautiful moment. It's a beautiful scene. You doing your thing. And I'm a photographer. I'm on my way to work, but I do have all my camera gear. Would you mind if I did a couple of portraits? So there's like a little insight into how I often like to work, which is, talking to folks and connecting. And he was like, no, go ahead. So I went and got my gear. We did a little session, and it's like, so that was like literally before I pulled on to the set, and he reminds me of a fellow artist friend of mine. We realized he reminded us of the African wrestlers. I think they're Senegalese wrestlers, just like how he's built and just the language of his body.
No, stunning. I love it. Let's next shot.
Just also how soft-spoken he was, man. That was kind of ironic. But so I popped this one in my set just because I thought it was an interesting, it's one of these foreign, it's like the French poster for Roman J. Israel Esquire. I shot all the stills, and then I ended up shooting all the key art as well, which was an interesting sort of dual purposes on a day. But we had all these montage type beats where they shot Denzel as Roman Israel walking out of sorts directly toward lens. And I put in both the US poster, which was shot against Seamless in a dusty church in the middle of the desert. And then this one, the French poster, where you can see they've masked him out and dropped out the energy, everything behind him, and just let it fall into that orange gold light and then reveal him. So just to give you an example of how one of our images can get translated downstream, other than just feeling like a still pulled directly from the film. Oftentimes, the creatives at the studios will decide, we're going to go this direction. We're going to use these images this way, graphically.
Let's go to the next one.
Yeah, so here's the domestic poster, which I was so excited when I saw this. And in fact, I worked back to back with Denzel. This film, which was a kind of a niche, character-driven, like you've never seen him like this before. And then the next one was the Equalizer 2, like massive action film, same cerebral intensity focus of the actor. But when I saw him on day one on Equalizer, he's like, hey, did you see the poster for Roman Israel? Because he knew he remembered the day in which we shot it. And I said, I did. He's like, what did you think? And I was like, I kind of love it. And he was like, I'm glad you, he's, I do too. It was like maybe the most we spoke on that whole project, by the way. But what's cool about this shot is I took 1,000 shots, all these concepts, mostly just around this character. And then he walked off set, just about off the Seamless, and I was about to put all my gear away and go back out to set. And I said, ooh, we need just one more quick shot. I had him come back onto the Seamless, and I shot him looking away from lens, and then him looking 3/4 profile reverse like this, just getting that detail of his glasses. and it was the last shot of the entire session. That's what they used for the poster.
I love this so much. It's so conceptual and so modern and interesting and just graphic. And it's like everything you would want to really showcase the idea of the film and also the idea of this actor totally playing someone we've never seen.
Yeah.
So I think that's
I
really
agree.
fantastic. So Glenn, we're gonna have to, I'm sorry, but we have now we come to our end of our time.
Cool.
So
Goes quick.
Zach, let's go back to full screen. You guys, this has been amazing. We could spend like 5 hours like going over everything. We haven't even got to doing like, you know, the art on set and stuff like that, type of how you work with the actors as like second director. That's a whole nother session. So maybe at some point we'll come back and do this some more.
Sounds great.
You guys have been so awesome. Tell us how we can see your work, where we can find you, not stalk you, but you know.
I am, you know, as far as social media goes, I have crept one post at a time into Instagram as probably the place where I will devote a little bit of time every day. And so even though my account's private and my sons say that's foolish, I think it's smart, but if you request a follow, I will almost certainly be appreciative and approve it. So, and then I'll probably follow you and then we could have a conversation.
Okay, and that's just your name? Is that what we're looking for?
Oh, actually, sorry, it's at Dub Arts, like dub, like the reggae style, DUB Arts, at Dub Arts. And then I can also, if you're really interested, I can give you my phone number through that.
Nicola?
I've had conversations with people, you know, that I met on Instagram.
Yeah, and my Instagram also sort of, I nosed into posting bits and pieces about me, my work, and it's nick.good, at nick, N-I-C.good with an E.
Okay, there we go. And it's been put in the chat for everybody. So thank you guys so much. It's so valuable and exciting. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time with us at New York Film Academy.
Thank you so much, Liz. It really was a pleasure. And it was nice to be able to talk to you, Glenn. We don't, you know, when we get together, we have nice conversations, and it's nice to do it here. It's hard to catch up with you sometimes. So thank you, Liz, for, you know, orchestrating this conversation.
Exactly. Yeah.
I fully appreciate it. And thank you for the invitation. And Nicola, let's meet up and go continue the conversation. And Liz, I think we're all,
I know,
stone's throw.
We're all doing it. Okay, wonderful. Thank you 2020 audience, and thank you New York Film Academy for presenting the 2020 series. And everybody be safe. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.